Thanks for joining the Joss and Crowd podcast, where we talk about photography, business, life, and a little bit more. Hello, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm excited to have you on here today. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, for sure. So the short version is I went from event planner to home organizer to business organizer. But essentially, I really help small business owners to organize and streamline the back end operations because most people did not start businesses to run the business, but all of that stuff still has to happen. So, yeah, I help organize it so they can be more efficient and get more done in less time.
That was like 60-second elevator speech. That was fantastic. You've said that a time or two, it sounds like. That's pretty awesome.
It's
What
not my
made
first
you
rodeo.
right? What made you want to get into that?
Yeah, so when I kind of fell into the event planning side of things, I've been that like weird 16-year-old when I was younger. I would like organize things and color code. Like I've always been like that. So I've always been that type A person. And then somebody had kind of mentioned, they're like, oh my gosh, you should be like a wedding and event planner. And I was like, that sounds amazing. So I started doing that and I realized I love like the back end logistics piece, but I hated the front end side and weddings and drama and like bridezillas. So yeah, I kind of transitioned and worked for a restaurant doing like corporate catering for weddings and events. And then I actually got let go. So I became an accidental entrepreneur and decided to just jump in and start a business.
That's awesome. So how long have you been doing this?
Yeah, so the business officially started in 2015. It really was just a side hustle at that point. So I technically started in 2016. And that was, I actually organized houses for about a year and a half and then transitioned into the online space. So I think it was like 2017, like this piece of it became official. So
So do you only work with businesses or do you help other people that are struggling to like get organized?
yeah. Typically I work a lot with business owners just because that's kind of the realm I'm in. I do feel like a lot of the stuff that I do though, is just general productivity tips for anybody that they could really get from. Especially like everybody that works on a computer, like finding things like digital workspace type of stuff. I feel like that applies to a lot of people. But yeah, I love working with business owners because I feel like I can make an impact on them, they can make an impact on people even better. And it's just kind of the ripple effect. So a little bit of both.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So what do you think is like your favorite thing about organizing?
Yeah. I feel like we all have this purpose, right? Like we're all here to do something. And when you can be organized about it and you've got systems in place to help you do the thing you're doing, I just feel like we can all move so much faster. I know for me, like if I didn't have a lot of these systems in place, I wouldn't be able to have a podcast and also a group coaching program and also do one-on-one stuff and also be on podcasts. Like if I didn't have systems in place, I wouldn't be able to do that as quickly because it just makes it harder. So I love like task management organizing because everyone has tasks. That's one of my favorite things. I do like a whole Asana overhaul for people. Now, obviously, there's like 1,000 different task management tools, but yeah, I think that's the biggest thing is like if you can just be more organized with what you're doing and trying to make an impact, you can just do it a lot faster.
Do you think that applies to anybody or is it like different types of people like with ADHD or different types of businesses or um
Yeah, I mean, I think it applies to everyone. I think that no one size system kind of fits all. I think a lot of people learn differently and have different work styles. And like you had mentioned, ADHD, I haven't really dove into that realm because I'm not super familiar with it. So there's a lot of different techniques that would work for them and work better for them than maybe somebody that didn't have that. So I do think there are some like underlying principles that apply to everybody, but there are different like work styles and techniques and tools and things that I think each person can kind of customize for themselves.
that's pretty awesome. What do you think
Yeah.
is like the best thing that people can do in that? Like is it their email? Is it their desktop? Is it different softwares? I know you said Asana. I know you've talked about that off of our podcast before.
Yeah.
And I've looked into it. What made you pick that and what are things that people can
Yeah.
do?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the biggest spaces to kind of do and detox first really are kind of your email and then your digital workspace. And then just how you keep track of tasks. I know a lot of people have lots of different notebooks and sticky notes and like things everywhere. And while that can work for a time, I feel like once you start to grow as a business or you have more stuff going on, it just gets more chaotic. So I think like the email side of things, task management side of things, and just kind of like finding things on your computer, right? There's actually a stat out there that says we spend 12 and a half hours a week looking for information on our
What?
desktops. Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's going to be like Zoom links and text messages and emails and files and like all of this stuff. Especially if you're an online business owner,
That's
because
so much time.
it's so much time. But if you think about it, I mean, if something takes you longer than a minute to find and you're looking for stuff constantly throughout the day to do your job, it just makes it so it's so much wasted time if you don't have kind of a system in place to find things faster. So I think really just like I think digital clutter is even more dangerous than physical clutter, honestly, because at least you can see physical clutter, like you can see stuff piling up. I feel like with digital, it just keeps piling up and like it just keeps going, right? So I think if people can get a system in place for that type of stuff, it can at least take away some of the stress to like actually just do their job or do their business. And then the task management side is huge. We all have million-mile long to-do lists, right?
Yes.
And for me, I put everything in Asana, and Asana for me is really my second brain. But I want to preface that the tool is not what does the magic, right? So I actually used to use Trello. I've tried like all of them. I tried ClickUp, I tried Monday.com, right? Like there's all of these different platforms. It really is the consistency in using it. It's not the tool. They are all made to do the same thing. Some have a few extra bells and whistles, but for the most part, they are there to perform the same job. And I just feel like for me, Asana, I get more done in there because it's just a list. So like I plan things out, I go in, I check things off. I feel like some of them, especially Trello, is like too pretty and you're like moving cards and like
Mm-hmm.
reshuffling things. And for me, when I moved to Asana, I saw a huge increase in productivity because I was just checking things off versus like moving cards constantly. So, but yeah, it's not the tool. It's I love Asana, but there's definitely pros and cons to all the different softwares out there.
So, do you think that it's best to have things that are organized on your phone or on your computer, or do you like? Can somebody else should somebody outsource that to somebody else? I am a notebook person. I know that you and I have talked about that before. I have such a struggle because I feel like if it's out of sight, it's out of mind. Like, what is something that you recommend for people? Because you're right. You get to a point in a business where you can't have, it's a lot of work to try to track down that ink paper and the post-its that fall on the floor. Like one day I came in and I had 5 post-its on the floor and I was like, what is happening? They're all out of order.
Yes, I know. And I know so many people are analog and love writing, and I totally understand that because there's also like science behind that, that like writing it puts it more concrete in your brain and all of those things. I'm a digital note taker myself. I've got my iPad, my Apple Notes, like all of the things, right? But I think for people that it's a struggle for them to kind of like wrap things up at the end. So, okay. So most of the time, and I did this when I first started, like I would take notes throughout the day. I had stuff all over the place and I didn't have a good routine to like put those things where they went. Right. So then the next day rolled in, we did it again. And then it just becomes this like mountain of paper and then it's out of sight, out of mind, like you just mentioned. I actually put in my 3 P's of productivity routine at the end of my day. And that has been the biggest game changer for me because, and it's actually almost more important than my morning routine, honestly. Because I'm really processing the notes I've taken throughout the day and then putting things where they go. And then I'm planning the next day before it even comes. So I feel like doing that the day before, I was able to hit the ground running so much faster instead of like showing up at 9 o'clock and then, you know, stuff comes in and people need you. And then you feel like you got nothing done throughout the day. So the whole out of sight, out of mind, you do have to create a system for yourself that works. But I feel like if you've got a system at the end of your day to like recap everything and put it where it goes, that'll kind of start to help with that, because then at least it's going into a place that you're going to be able to go access it again.
It probably also helps reduce the clutter in your life. Like you said with notebooks, as I like don't look behind
Yeah.
me on my screen. I actually made a TikTok video earlier this year that was like a guy was talking about how he has a notebook for everything. And I do edit it because I have like 25 notebooks.
Yeah.
But mine is also like creative ideas that sometimes I do have to brain dump. It's not like a to-do list. So like
Yeah.
sometimes those need to get written down because it's drawing and everything. And I go back to them and stuff. But I think a lot of times too, like if your desk is cluttered, like you're not going to feel very productive. You're going to feel overwhelmed. And like getting that off of a notebook or post it and putting it on a computer can organize you. And then like you can access it on your phone when you're like running an errand and like
Yeah.
grocery lists and all those things. Like I prefer to do my grocery list on my phone. Like I have a to-do list on there.
Yep.
So like there are, you don't have to feel like you change your whole life at
Yeah.
once. I'm starting slowly.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Everyone always asks for all these tips and they're like, oh my gosh, I can't go implement all of those things. And the fact is, like, it didn't get like this overnight, right? Like if you've been a business owner, it kind of just starts accumulating, you get into habits. It's all of these different things. And I think that people, if you can just take one thing and like implement it very consistently, or one system and set that up for yourself. For me, Asana is the biggest thing, because I felt like before I had Asana and before I had a tool like that, my head held everything. Like I was thinking about all the appointments. I have kids, right? So I have twins, I've got dogs, I run this business full time. So all the household stuff, I felt like my brain was just like crammed full of information all the time. And like one little piece that came in, like I felt like I was just gonna be like and explode. And I feel like now with Asana, at least I have a place to put it and I'm not thinking about it. Now, does stuff get forgotten sometimes? Absolutely. Like I have 50,000 things going on at any given time, but I feel like it's going to be less forgotten if it's in there with a due date on it versus like me trying to remember it. So, even just that piece of things, if you can like get all of your tasks into one place, I feel like that even helps you plan better, because then you actually know how much you have going on. If you've got like 14 sticky notes and tasks inside your notebook and like client tasks in a million different places, you actually don't know how much time that's even going to take you, because they're kind of everywhere. But when you start to see it all together, most likely you're going to see that you've overcommitted to way too much stuff and you need to take things off your list.
Do you think that it helps if things are like coded, like color coding or different groupings or different days of the weeks? I know I started doing like my Instagram posts, like each day has a different theme so that I can notate and like navigate that way. And I do that digitally as well. Do you think that that is a personality trait, or do you think that there is science backed behind doing things in categories and colors?
So I think that so many people think that like you're either type A or you're not, right? Like you are organized or you're not. And there is some truth to that, right? Like I was just born being like an organized person. Like that's just how I am. But I do also feel like it's a skill that can be learned, because there are basic principles that kind of apply to everything. As far as color coding, I'm a huge color coder. I actually use the same color codes for everything across the board. So anything blue is business, purple is personal, pink is clients. And I do that for like my calendar, my Asana, like literally everything is color coded the same way. And then as far as the kind of like batching that you were talking about, I think that because we have to access different parts of our brain for different types of tasks, if you can batch those things, you could be more productive with the same types of tasks at one time. So for me, I use the BCO method. So it stands for Brittany and Co., but it's also business development, client services, and operations. And as business owners, especially, we all have those three areas. And I think all of us try to like bounce between all three like all day long. And it's really unproductive, because you're going from like creative energy when like you're creating social media, like you were saying, and batching different things for Instagram. And then you go to like your bookkeeping, and then you're doing client work, and then you go back to accounting stuff. Like you're accessing 3 different parts of your brain. And when you have to keep switching, there's science behind this that it takes like 23 minutes every time you switch tasks to like get back on task and like do the thing. So I like to tell people if you can batch those same types of tasks together, at least you're using the same energy and the same kind of brain space. But when you're kind of bouncing between all of these different things, it's just it's overload, right? So it's the multitasking everybody thinks so cool that you can get so much done. You're actually getting less done because you're all over the place. So yeah, I love batching. I love color coding. I do things, all of that.
It's funny you said the multitasking, because I was just having a conversation about that recently with somebody, how when I worked in corporate world, that was every time we did our resume, it was like great at multitasking.
Yeah.
And I'm like, as a business owner, F that noise. Like I want nothing to do with multitasking.
Yep.
I tried to have like my days, I tried to do it originally where it was like, for 1 hour, I'll work on this project, for another hour, I'll work on my podcast. And then for 3 hours, I'll work on editing, and then I'll work on email. And my brain could not do it. And I had some conversations with people about ADHD, and I've had other podcasters about ADHD. And I at times I'm like, do we have ADHD, or are we just forcing ourselves to be multitaskers when our brain just can't do it? And that's when I started doing it by days. And I do feel like I color coordinate my calendar. I'm old school and I have a printed calendar.
Yeah.
Because if not, I just feel like I forget it. But I am actively trying. I have an Asana account, and I've been actively trying to get more digital because my business is growing, the more podcasts and everything. So I was really excited about having you on, because I know that you've helped with like organizing emails and stuff like that. I know one time when we were talking about it, you said something about minimalizing the categories, because so many people put so many folders, and then you have so many folders that you don't access anything because there's.
Yeah. And I think that people that are not kind of like naturally organized, or they don't feel like they're that type A person, they go in thinking that they have to be like super hyper organized. So they start putting like a folder within a folder within a folder, and then like you're 47 folders deep, and no one's actually going to access that. Like no one is going to like click through that many times to go file something away. So yeah, I use the BCO method for that too. And I think I don't know what the science is behind this, but I'm sure there is, because I only have to think about one of those 3 categories when I go in my email, when I go in my Google Drive, when I go into Asana, when I go pretty much anywhere. Those are the 3 categories that everything kind of falls into. And when I go into my email, I do have some subfolders, obviously, because like within operations, I have like team and financial and things like that. But you've got to keep it high level and only have a couple subfolders, because if you try to get super hyper organized, you're going to forget where that even goes, which means you're not going to file it away. So it would be so much better to just have high level categories, because especially for email, you're just going to go search the search bar anyway. Like, let's be real.
Yep. 100%.
So you really just need a quick filing system to say like, okay, I finished this email. I need to save it and archive it. Which folder does it go into? And you just drop it super quickly, because you're going to search for it anyway. Same thing with Google Drive. I feel like you go to the search bar for the most part for that, for Asana. So it just needs to be super high level and super fast, because I think too many people that are not naturally organized, they're like, oh, I'm going to get really organized. I'm going to create like 47 different folders. And I think that that's kind of the opposite approach. I go with like less is more for pretty much everything.
I have a system that I put in play for all of my photography clients.
Yeah.
And when I do mentoring, I help people with that, because you can lose so many photos. And I have such a system that it's so simple. Every client, like it goes by a year, then it goes by the month, and then it goes by the client's name. And inside that is like the raw images, the edited, like the final, whatever, album, whatever. And it makes it so much more efficient to find those images when I need to and upload them. But I get sometimes people when they're like, oh, I just drop them all into a year. And I'm like, oh, no. Or then I see them where it's like first edit. Like I have a degree in graphic design. So anybody that's ever designed anything, you have so many different drafts, but it would be like first edit, second edit, third edit. And I'm like, I'm never going to go back to this first or second or third or 70.
Right.
Like, let's just delete them and move on. And I think like there's a relief to when you edit, like when you delete things that you don't need. Do you think that people have a hard time deleting and letting go of things?
Yeah, for sure. That's probably the biggest thing I see is like people need to do a detox, and especially like email and files type of thing. Those are both huge, huge spaces, because I think that if we don't file it away, it kind of just sits there, and we could go back to it, but most likely we got the value from the thing before we put it in there. Like we looked at it and then we're like, okay, we'll save this for later. But I think that detoxing old files and detoxing old pictures and like stuff that you're not using, it really just helps clear the clutter, right? Because then you're not having to sift through lots of different stuff. And with the like filing system, that again goes back to that decision fatigue that I was kind of talking about. Like you don't have to think about it because you're like, oh, this was this year, it was this month, here's the client. So the structure's the same across the board. So when you can kind of combine that and detox things and make a really simple system, you're going to shave off that time that we're spending every single week searching for information, because it's, you just go nowhere to go and you don't have to sift through clutter.
So, traumatic story. Recently, I shattered my computer screen.
Oh, no.
It was a series of unfortunate events, and it's so crazy how it ended up happening. But I have a computer, a $3,500 Surface Book computer. So not an easy, cheap fix that somebody can just go out and replace. And
Right.
so, of course, like of all the things in my life to break, like camera, computer, probably most important. And the battery wasn't holding charge. So I had gone back and forth with Microsoft, and then I ended up contacting a computer company, and I was going there, and she's like, you need to back up everything. Like your computer's on borrowed time, and there is something with the connection with the battery or whatever, like the board is going bad, it's defective. And I was like, okay, great, fun times. So of course I was like, I've got to back up everything, because I back up my clients' photos, but I didn't back up any of my stuff. And I'm like, oh, I'll get to that later. So I ended up joining the Google Drive community. And it's been so much easier, but that the peace of mind knowing that my stuff is there now is also a relief, because 24 hours later, I also shattered my screen on accident. So my insurance has been processed and everything. It was such a fluke, but I was trying to make it so that the cord could hold still to hold charge, and I dropped the board that I was trying to like.
Oh no.
Yeah, just chaos. I mean, things happen, peaks and valleys in life. It was very difficult when it was happening, but I was very thankful that I was able to organize my Google Drive. And it's such a weird peace of mind, because I've been doing, like I've been a photographer for 22 years, been a business for over 13. And I didn't really get organized until I was forced to get organized. And now I know, like, oh, those are there, and I can access it on my phone too. So like there's blessings in the curses, I guess. But it's weird how mentally I'm like, oh, nope, that's good. And just different systems that I've done, and like things that you've mentioned along the way, that I'm like, oh, I can do this and do that. And it frees up our time, but the weight that our mind doesn't have anymore. It's like a brain dump that it's like, yeah, it's safe there, it's comfortable there. And especially with having, I'm not a huge fan of cloud services, just because I'm so old school with like, I mean, I learned photography on film. So like I'm old school. But like I think privacy is important, and so like I try to like be cautious of that. But there are some things that are just, it makes our life easier, instead of trying to go against it and be like, I have to use this notebook, or I have to do it this way, to change those patterns. And I was fortunate because I couldn't move my computer to back it up to an external hard drive, because I couldn't move the cord. So like it made me feel real uncomfortable, but now it's comfortable. Putting systems into play is probably something I'm going to take more action on in 2023. And I mean, I'm trying to do that now, but I think like people listening to our podcast as well, because with the new year, people always seem to get organized. Do you think that people start in January and like, I'm going to do this, and then you see them trail off and start failing? Like, what's something that you would recommend for that?
So a couple things. Yes, I do see that, like, everyone kind of the beginning of the year, they're like, okay, I'm going to get organized, just like going to the gym. They're like, I'm going to go to the gym, and they go for a month and then it drops off. So I definitely see that. And honestly, I would rather them not start in January if that's the case. Like, let's just look at taking incremental action instead. I actually push a lot of my clients to do it before the new year, just because I'm like, you would rather like start fresh than like start in January and then like things are already going. So to your point on the Google Drive stuff, I actually almost had something like that happen too. And I actually saved nothing on my Google Drive or on my desktop. I saved nothing on my laptop. Like, everything goes into Google Drive because I know that if all of my devices crashed, I could still access it. So it's even little stuff like that, right? So you were forced to move that, but maybe that's something that somebody's struggling with now. They're like, I can never find stuff. And I know for me, I co-work sometimes and I use my laptop sometimes and desktop sometimes. So I can't leave stuff on individual devices because then I'm not going to have it if I'm on the other device. So that could be one little step, is like gather all of your files all into one place. Google Drive obviously is my favorite because you can access it from anywhere.
Yeah.
But you just have to start taking these steps. And I think it's probably important to say that, like, I think the word systems scare people. Like, when people are like, systems, workflows, like, I think it scares people. And I think you just have to realize that systems are not necessarily tech. Like, a system could even be a routine. It could be your planning routine for the week. It could be like my end of day routine that I do. That's still a system that you're following. It's a like step-by-step process that you're trying to achieve something. So it's not necessarily the tech every time. Now, the tech definitely helps us, right? It helps automate things, helps to make things faster. But it goes back to, you can have all the tech in the world. If you don't use it consistently, it's not going to do anything for you either. So I think it really is just like deciding, okay, I know I need to get more organized. I know I need to put some systems in place, and really kind of mapping out what that is for you, because it's going to be different for every person for sure.
Fascinating. You said something that triggered, when I got my studio space, I needed a speaker for music. And so I had like a Bluetooth one, and then Amazon came out. I don't want to trigger anybody's device, but
we have one.
yeah. But like I started incorporating that. And one of the things that was interesting was, like, my father had had a stroke and he had lost his eyesight temporarily. Thankfully, he got it back after like therapy and everything, medication. But I ended up getting him one of those because he could ask at the time, he could ask at the news, and like that was something that he could do every morning. He could have him turn on the lights, and like it was just so fascinating that like he had to switch and how his pattern and his routine was. So I ended up getting one for my home, and then I eventually got it for my studio because I was like, oh, I can play music and I can do that.
Yeah.
But I just now realized like that's a system that I put into place, because it turns off my lights every night. It turns my temperatures to different temperatures to save on the electric. There's just different routines that it does now that I've set it up that makes my life more efficient. And like, if I leave my studio and my hands are full, I know that in a half an hour, the lights are going to shut off on their own. And like the peace of mind that it gives. And I think, like you said, it doesn't have to be digitally if it's routine. Like, different things incorporate our different patterns, where it's like, oh, well, we get gas on Sunday, we get groceries on Monday, and like setting up a routine and a system can make things more efficient, where we don't feel so boggled down and we're probably doing it and we don't even know we're doing it, or we have a routine that's not a good routine that just needs tweaked.
Yeah. And I see that. I mean, so we have one of those devices as well. We've got multiple of them. But
I have like
we
8. It's a
actually,
problem.
I know, I think we have like 4 now. And I'm like, okay, we should probably stop. Our house is not that big.
That's the
Um,
same.
but the kids and my husband, like, we'll all add stuff to the grocery list throughout the entire week when we run out of stuff, or when we're like, oh, we really want this for dinner or whatever. So then on Saturdays, I literally go in and I pretty much have a list created, and then I just add the regular stuff and place an order. Like that routine alone saved us probably 3 or 4 hours, because we would have to sit down and like brainstorm everything we needed, and like, oh yeah, are we out of this? Did we need this? And that's why I'm saying it doesn't have to be technology. It doesn't have to be for business. Like, it could be something as simple as that. I have a friend that she goes to the store like 4 times a week. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, can you not just do this all in one day? She's like,
Yeah.
yeah, but I forgot this and I didn't do this. And I'm like, you need a better system for this, because we used to do it too when the kids were little. Like, we would go to the store so often. I'm like, we're wasting so much time. Like, why can't we just do this once a week or twice a week? Right. So I think it could be even like little routines and things like that. We have a whiteboard on our fridge that we write down like tasks for the weekend so that everybody can do them. So that I'm not having to be the one that does everything. We've got a whiteboard for like our meal planning. So I think it's even just little stuff in the house and kind of how you're doing that it just, again, takes that burden off of your brain. Like, I don't have to think about that stuff all the time because it's in a place and I know it's there. I know it's safe. I know I'll get to it at some point. And I think that was the biggest thing that, like, I hear a lot of business owners that are like, oh my gosh, I woke up at 3 a.m. and I was thinking about this thing and I forgot to send this email and I forgot to do that. And that was me probably about 5 or 6 years ago. And then I put systems in place and the anxiety is gone. I don't wake up like that because, again, I know it's somewhere waiting for me and I'll get to it when I get to it, kind of thing. So like, even just the anxiety that they take off and the mental load that it takes off by having these systems in place is such a huge blessing.
That's fascinating. So you have kids. Is
do.
it something that you have been making sure that they're learning how to do this? Does your
Yes.
husband do this? Like, is there a change with that? I know a lot of the people that I've had on my podcast have kids, and I feel like a lot of times, like, I'm single. I'm not married and no kids and all. So it's always fascinating to me to hear different things, but I feel like they get a lot of resistance. Like, is that something that people hold themselves back because they think that their family won't be incorporating the same routine, and then they feel like it's just all on them again?
Yeah, I definitely see that. Like, the mom that's just like, oh, I just feel like it's easier if I just do it. I don't want to incorporate that to the kids or the husband. I feel like it's so important to do, though. This is a whole other rabbit hole, but like, the education system does not teach kids organization, which is probably why I have a business at this point, right?
Yeah.
But they don't teach them organization. They don't really teach planners until you get to high school. And then it's not really even enforced. It's kind of like you can use this if you want kind of thing. So I just feel like it's so important to get them involved in that now. So we actually have incorporated like a weekly family meeting, and I got my kids. So they're both in 4th grade. They're twins. I got them planners, and while they don't really have to plan things, I still want to get them in the habit of like, what do we have going on this week as a family? Like, what do you want to do this week? What do you want to read this week? So we'll sit down every Sunday and map that out, because I want them to get in the habit of doing that and planning ahead. And then as far as like using the grocery list, like, I've got them incorporated in that. So then they know that I'm going to get the thing that they want because they've been incorporated. Same thing with just like cleaning schedules and all that stuff. It took me like probably almost a year to get my husband integrated into Asana. There was a lot of resistance there. But finally, like, he got in there, and like, I would assign him stuff and he would check it off, and it's fantastic. And now he puts his own tasks in there, and it's just great. But I think there is resistance to it, but it's a routine that you have to put into play, and it's a habit you have to learn. So it's also a habit that they have to learn. So it's not this overnight thing that you're gonna be like, hey, we're doing this thing, and everybody jumps on board. It's like a habit that you're going to have to build. So, but I think it's so important to get kids involved early in organizing and like learning how to plan and goal plan. Like, we do a vision board every year and we check on our goals. And I just think that's something that's not taught nowadays in school. So I think parents really just need to like hone in on it, because that helps set us up for success in the future, right? Like I know I was not taught goal planning or to use planners or like to do this stuff in school.
I was not either. Yep.
Yeah. So then it became really hard to manage your time as an adult. And like when I started a business, I'm like, oh my gosh, how do you do this? And I've had to learn it. Now, luckily for me, I was type A and I kind of had some of those skills ingrained in me, but I know for so many business owners, they're not. And that's really hard to learn, like time management and goal planning and reverse engineering things. And I just think if it's taught early on, it would be so much better for everybody.
I would agree with that. I have always it was funny. I've mentioned this on other podcasts, but I just recorded another one and we were talking about the same topic. And I think with schools, they don't teach a lot of things that we need as an adult. And it's a structured thing where it's like, okay, you have to be there at 7:30 in the morning. You have to clock in. You have to make sure that your dress code is acceptable. You have to have this many hours of this class and you have to have this many hours of this class. And then you leave and then it's like, you also have homework to do. So like you're not getting your own time because you clocked out for the day. But then you still have to go home and do work. And that is setting an example of like, you go into corporate world, well, you're clocked out at 5 o'clock, go home, but you're going to still need to take your laptop home with you and you're still going to have to work. And that is just not how it should be.
And then that rolls into the entrepreneur space where we think it's fine to just work 17, 18 hours a day and like 7 days a week. And we get addicted to this like work habit. And then we get burnout really, really quick. Yeah.
And the burnout's way worse. Yeah.
Oh, burnout is so much worse. I actually almost burned my business down about 7 months ago because I hit burnout. I didn't have boundaries. I had some boundaries, but I let a lot of stuff through. I was saying yes to way too much stuff. I had personal stuff going on in my life. Like all of this stuff, it was just like this culmination that just happened. And I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. Like I'm out. And I told my community and they're like, oh my God, no, just take a break. But it's like you said, they're starting that early on. It's like you work 9 to 5 and then you go home and you do your homework and then you come back and do it again. And it's setting that up for corporate. And there's so many corporate jobs that do that and that it's acceptable to work after work. And then entrepreneurs, as we know, we just work all the time.
Yeah.
Now, the hard part too is like, I love what I do, so it doesn't feel like work, but you have to have boundaries so that especially people with kids and families and you've got to have boundaries in place. And I feel like for me, I've done really, really well with that. There are seasons, obviously, where I'm like all in and it's crazy, but then there's seasons that I take off and we go camping a lot. But I think it's starting from school age that it's like setting up these bad habits of not planning, working after work, like all of these different things. And it's detrimental because I see so many people in burnout right now, for sure.
Well, you even made a prime example too. Like in school, we learn like, okay, well, first period's math, second period science, like third period's health, like all these different things. And as you said, like it takes 23 minutes for our brain to shift. You only get an hour class to learn, right. And you're still trying to figure out the math question from 2 hours ago. And like, it's just very overwhelming. I don't have kids, but if I did, I feel like I would end up wanting to homeschool them because of that. Yep. I did not flourish in school whatsoever. I feel like I had a really hard time through school, and I've spent the last 20 years undoing all the things that I learned. I have friends that are teachers. I adore them. I'm grateful for them, but it was just not for me. And sometimes it is for people, but I have that creative mindset and I have the entrepreneurial mindset. And school was not for me, unfortunately, but I started thriving better when I put in different ways to learn different techniques and scheduling things for different clients and them being able to book online or sending a link or sending an invoice instead of trying to do things manually because, well, that's how everybody else did it. And just having that freedom of going, okay, well, I can write my own rules. Like that's why I became a business owner. So I could write my own rules. I could write my own handbook. But one of the things that I had said recently that I want to have an employee, and I know that I can outsource things, and like we have Fiverr and Upwork and all these other different creative outlets and stuff, but I want somebody that I can have a relationship with, that I can check in and, you know, do daily video chats with, or sit in my studio with, and put in systems into play that we can have a good routine, that they can go off into their own, you know, field, or stay with me forever, which like, but like have things that are organized. And I think that like working, if people have been entrepreneurs that have other businesses, we got so used to their quote unquote systems that were very faulty. And you have to kind of unlearn all of that and unlearn what they taught us in school and stuff like that. And it's such a simple thing when you said like just asking the electronic device to add bread to your grocery list can be something so simple but so effective. Like I don't think I even realized that I could do that, and so now I'm probably going to start doing that because I can do that between emails and be like, oh, I need this or something. And I have the app on my phone because it's just me controlling them all, and so that can be my grocery list now. So
and it's little shifts like that. It really is. But I think what so many people don't realize, especially if you've worked corporate before you became an entrepreneur or you worked for someone, is that those systems were created for you and you just had to like plop into them, versus as being a business owner, you have to create them and do them and fix them when they're not working, and create more when you add things and do them and fix them. Like working for someone, you're just popping in. It's I tell my husband this all the time. He is not an entrepreneur. He works for people. He goes in, he clocks in, he does his thing, he clocks out, and he doesn't think about work. I'm like, that is not how this works for entrepreneurs. I'm like, I clock in, different time every day. I do things, different time every day. I am 14 different people because I have to be the accounting person and the this and the this and the this. And I have to fix all the problems on top of what I'm doing. And it's exhausting. So that kind of even helped him get into Asana with me, because I'm like, I literally am not Superwoman. And if you don't help do these things, they're not going to happen, because I am 14 people in my business. And I think that when you start to be able to outsource that and give that to someone else, you have to have the system already, because if you don't have the system already and pass it to them, they're not going to know what to do, or they're not going to do it the same way that you want them to. So for me, like I have teammates and they're all over the US. So all of our stuff's digital, obviously, but like I have somebody that edits my podcast, and I have somebody that pitches people for podcasts. And if I didn't have systems, I wouldn't be able to have that. And I wouldn't be able to kind of expand, because I would be stuck doing everything myself. And I still already do a lot, even though I have team members.
Well, we had a discussion, and my time like blends in together, so I don't know what the time frame was, but I kind of shifted in how I did my podcast because of something you said, and I was like, oh, I can do this differently, and it's been so much more lighter to me. Like it's not such. I started my podcast because it's fun to me, and like it's funny because people think that. And people do make money off of podcasts, don't get me wrong. But like people thought I was making a ton of money on it. I was like, no, I'm just doing this for fun. Like, they're like, what? And I'm like, well, there's other perks that come into play and links and all the other things and advertisements and stuff like that. But I didn't want something that was that I started for fun to be so much work. And I pivoted because of the way you had said. I'm not completely outsourcing everything, but I found so many different ways to make it better that when I do outsource it, it's going to be easy transition into it. So,
and that's the hardest thing, is that you don't know what you don't know. So you're like, this is how I'm doing it. It seems to be working. And because you're so in the business, you can't see another way. Right. So like, that's where somebody like me could come into play. And I basically just have my clients brain dump literally everything. They're like, this is how I do this, and these are the systems I use. And I'm like, oh, we could totally combine these two, and we can take this one away, and we can do this like this. So I think a lot of times it's one of those, like, you just don't know what you don't know. And having the outside perspective of somebody that's like not in the bubble can help you find even just little things like that, right? Like it doesn't have to be these massive shifts, but for you, if you go and put things on your Amazon Echo and your grocery list, and that saves you a half an hour, like totally worth it. And it was just a tiny shift. So I think having that outsider's perspective to even just like give you an idea of things that could make it better could be huge. And again, you don't have to change everything overnight. It did not get like this overnight. Like one little thing at a time, one little habit, one little system, one little routine can just make the world of difference.
I think entrepreneurs have a tendency to, especially new entrepreneurs, not to call them out, but they don't like to ask for help because they get in this whole mentality of, I'm doing this, watch me, I can do this. And like I've had people that have messaged me on social media and they're like, oh, can you give me tips in this? And I'll give advice. And they're like, oh, I don't need to do that. And I'm like, in 3 years, you're going to regret that statement because you're going to be like, oh my God, I did it the hard way. And so like, it's embracing that change, because in order for you to climb that ladder to get to the next stage, you have to kind of do that. I recently asked somebody for help and I was like, literally Snapchatted all my friends. I was like, mark it on the calendar. I asked for help today, because it's such a rarity for me to do that. But for business aspects, like it's even harder for people because you have pride. You don't want to fail. You don't want somebody to think you're suffering. You don't want them to feel like you are drowning. And it's on something so simple, like your email box got out of hand. Well, like your friend might be able to go through and delete all your emails that are junk emails or unsubscribe for you, or, you know, like friends like doing that. Like I love helping my friends. And like just doing different things, but
yeah, and I think, I mean, it's not even new entrepreneurs. I have trouble asking for help, honestly. Like I grew up super poor, moved out when I was 18, had to do everything by myself, and just literally that was ingrained in me. So I am terrible at asking for help.
Same.
I just started therapy back in February, and like that took a lot for me to even push that forward. So I don't think it's just new entrepreneurs. I think it's a lot of people just, they're like, no, I got this.
Yeah.
I got this. It's fine. And it could just be that one person that helped you do one thing that could change literally everything. Like one person could say the one thing that clears up everything that you needed. And then like light bulb moments go off and everything starts working and you've got free time and everything's aligning. So you can't be afraid to ask for help. Like it's not what you like business owners. You didn't start a business to run a business. No one did, right? Nope. No one was like, I want to run a business. They're like, I'm good at a thing. Someone's going to pay me for said thing. So I'm going to start this business. Oh crap, I have to do all this other stuff that comes along with it.
100%. I've actually had mentoring with some photographers that we had that discussion because they're like, I love taking pictures, but I hate everything about it. They hate literally everything other than taking pictures. And I said, well, you have two choices here. You either continue to take pictures for fun or you outsource all of that. And they're like, well, I can't afford that. And I said, then you're not a business. You're just,
it's a hobby.
It's a hobby for you. And until you can do that, and like, that's what's hard. I see it so many times with creative people. They have a mentality. It's so fun and rewarding for them to create a painting or a drawing. They don't know how to price it. And I've told them, like, I have a sales background. Like I worked on commission, like that set some foundations for me for my business because I knew I had to sell myself as a business and a photographer, but I still have that inner voice that's like, your work's not good enough. No one's going to buy it. And like, you have to get that past that, and say, you know, I am a business. I have to do that. But one of the things that has been super hard for me has always been asking for help. And one of my Facebook friends, he made a status this year, was the beginning of the year, that said, it was a quote. I don't know who wrote it. And I hate that because I like to credit authors, but that's just the author in me. Like I want credit for my quotes too. But it was, you can't win alone. And that has been resonating with me because we all have different skills and we all have different talents, and using those to put them all together. It's like, you can't make cookies without flour and brown sugar and eggs and salt, and like some of it, you need more ingredients of the other, but at the end of it, if you get it right, you can make a really good cookie. And I think that's the same concept with the business, is like, you have to have different things in play to help people. And I think out of like, if I could go back and, I mean, I know I can put systems into play, but if I could go back to when I first started, that's where I was lacking completely. Like everything was a mess. Digital was out of, especially because I do everything on paper.
Yeah.
But I definitely feel like systems is a huge thing that people need in their business, but it trickles into their life and it helps them with their kids and their relationships and stuff. So I think it's like super important that what you do. Is there like a piece of advice or a task or something that you could give people that you're like, start with this and this might ripple into something bigger?
Yeah, I think it's just really that digital workspace, especially if you're working on the computer. So I essentially call that like my Chrome, my bookmarks, all of my softwares that I bookmark, my passwords and my extensions there. Like organizing that, I felt like saved a crap load of time because I was not searching for stuff constantly. I'm like, oh wait, where's that login? Where's that password? Where's that username? I feel like that then trickles because you see the effect of that so quickly that you're like, oh, I want to do the same thing to my email. Oh, I want to do the same thing to my Google Drive. Now I'm going to get all my files together. And then you can get into bigger systems. Because I think even the higher end clients that I work with that we're putting together like CRMs and automation and all of this stuff, it still comes back to task management, time management, and digital files. Like those are kind of the 3 core areas that if you don't have those under control, it doesn't matter what we do with all this other stuff, it's going to come back to this. So I think even just starting as small as like your email inbox or your Google Drive or something like that, you're going to see the ripple effect of that and want to do even more.
Or your phone.
Or your phone. Yeah, your apps. Yes, yes, yes. Start there. Delete your apps.
Yes, I hate having all these apps. Every time it's like, I used to go to a local food place here and like they had you scan like a reward card. Well, they got rid of it and now they just do an app reward. I'm like, I stopped going because I'm like, I don't get the rewards that I got now because I have to have an app. But I was talking to somebody about how like they save TikTok videos and they have screenshots of different ideas they see from people having like reels and videos. They screenshot it.
Yep.
And I was like, hey, why don't you? I was like, you have a Pinterest board, right? And I was like, why don't you just upload those to your Pinterest and then delete them off their phone? And their face just like lit up. They're like, wait a minute, because I searched my Pinterest board. You're just telling me. And I was like, and if you do it where the watermark is on, it also helps that content creator. And they're like, right. I didn't even think about this. And I was like, you can make them private so people don't see them and they're organized. And I didn't even realize that, like, I have an Android. I'm an Android girl, but I didn't realize that people's Apples, like it just automatically uploads them to a cloud and everything. I'm like, why are you saving them if they're already on your they're already on your phone, delete them, move on. But I mean, I have a very organized chaos with my photos, but I can find them pretty quick. But now that I have Google Drive, I started with my computer, but I'm putting them on there so that I can back them up and get them off. So I can find them easier because you can rename them and you can search for things that way, which makes it way easier. But
I love that. Yeah. And I think one of the biggest things for me that I see kind of going back to like not asking for help and like the ego thing, everyone's like, oh no, I already have that done. I already did that. It works fine. And 99% of the time, if I looked at it and like, you could do this better and this better and this better. So like be open to suggestions of people like giving you better ways, because again, you're like in the middle of this bubble and you can't see anything else. You're like just here. I see that a lot. I see a lot of, especially women, they're like, no, it's fine. I've already done that. Got that down. And a lot of times I'll go in and I'm like, but if you did this, you would save yourself like 10 minutes per thing. And they're like, oh, but if you're not open to it, you're not going to be able to receive that and make things better and make things faster and easier for yourself.
I'm sure you hear people say, oh, I don't have time for that either. And then you're like,
1,000%. Yeah. I'm like, yeah, but the system I'm giving you is going to create more time for you. Like, yes, the one time you have to set it up, we have to spend extra time, but then it like just saves you time on rinse and repeat, like over and over and over. Yeah.
There was something I listened to, and I don't know who it was. I mean, it's been 7 years. It was a video that I listened to, a guy that said he gets up every day and makes his bed, and that's how he starts his day. And then at the end of the day, he puts his clothes out for the next day. and has his lunch packed of what he can. And I started implementing that, and that had been like such an easy thing to do.
Yep.
Kind of Mel Robinson, I think, does it too, where she's like, if you can do it in 5 seconds, do it. Like,
Yes.
just, I think she says it's there's like 2 different people, but essentially like if you drop it, pick it up and fix it, it's the same concept with like, you have to save that email. If you just save it to that folder, it's going to save you long time instead of just going like, oh, I'll get back to it later. Because then our
laying out the clothes thing, I make my kids lay out their 5 outfits every single Sunday. Saves me so much time and arguing in the morning. I'm like, lay out 5 outfits. You don't have to wear them in order. You can wear them however you want, but you need to have 5 complete outfits on Sunday for the entire week. And then you can just pick one. And it was a game changer. Again, something so small can make such a big difference. I'm like, lay out 5 outfits. Now we don't have to fight about finding socks in the morning.
Like, I didn't think about it that way. That's a good idea. When I started my business, I got a ton of black t-shirts and black sweaters. Literally just would go to the store and bought 7 of them. And that's what I wear every day. And some of my friends were like, don't you think that people are going to be afraid that you're wearing the same thing every day? And I was like, in my business, I don't see the same people every day.
Right.
And it's one last thing that I have to make a decision for. And when I do the laundry, I can put the jeans and the black t-shirts and black sweaters all in the same load.
Yep.
So it was like condensing down time, but I have since started wearing color, and I know that gray is not really a color, but it still can be washed with black.
Yes.
And I think like I'm probably going to start implementing that too, because the 5 days, like I could do that with my workout clothes too. So then I know that I can work out every day. So that's a great tip.
And we're actually contemplating living in an RV for a year coming up here, like after the kids get out of school and homeschooling. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to have like a capsule wardrobe. We're gonna have to like implement so many of these other things into play. And it is just little tiny tweaks like that. They're just game changers. So it doesn't have to be like, go set up this insane system with like 47 automations. It's setting up your Amazon Echo to do your grocery list and saving yourself time. Like it's just little stuff like that. So
well, even Amazon has the subscribe and save. So like if you know you get the same thing every month, like set it up to let it roll out that way.
Set it and forget it. I love anything automated like that. I have wine delivered like that. Like,
nice.
My wine on auto ship, and it's fantastic. It just shows up at my door.
Nice. I feel like anybody that likes wine has just ran to their subscribe. Like, oh, that's my first step. We're gonna automate that.
Automate your wine delivery. I mean, now you don't have to go to the store, look at all the bottles, and like spend an hour deciding which wine you want.
That's what one of my friends just started with one of the food deliveries. Like they pick their food on Thursday and then it gets delivered and they have their meals for the week. And it's just such a weight and that off of her shoulders because she knows she has food coming and she has dinner every night.
I think the biggest thing is the decision fatigue, deciding where it goes, deciding where to put it, deciding where to find it, deciding what to wear. Like we make so many freaking decisions every day. If we could just put one system to take a few of those things off our plate, like game changer for sure.
Yes. I had gone out with one of my friends probably the first 6 months or so as I became a full-time business and I was utterly exhausted because I was doing it all by myself. And they were like, where do you want to go to eat? And I was like, do not make me decide this.
Yes.
Like, please do not make me decide
this is the decision every time. Like my husband and I are in the car. He's like, where do you want to go? And I'm like, I just have to make 47,000 decisions today. I don't care as long as there's food.
Which is why I ended up switching my clothes to one thing. I'm like, I don't have to decide what I'm wearing. I'm just going to put it on. So yeah, like we probably have more systems in our lives than we realize. We just need to tweak them.
Yes. Oh my gosh. That is a great point. So many people come to me and I was like, what systems do you have? They're like, I have nothing. And I was like, that's not accurate. You have to have something to even like exist as a human. So you have systems and routines in place. Yes, we can probably find some ways to tweak them, to make them automated, to make them more streamlined, but you have stuff in place. So like evaluate that first and see what you have and then like build from there.
Do you think there's something that you notice in every business that every business seems to struggle with the most with organizing?
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to digital files, honestly. I mean, I think a lot of people need CRMs and don't have them, but they find a way around that. But nobody can find a way around digital files like PDFs and JPEG images and downloads and all of this stuff. Like it's constant information overload coming into us all day long. And if you don't have I have a system that I put things in and it still gets overwhelming. So if you don't have a system to put stuff in, it can get out of control very, very quickly. So honestly, I think that's probably the biggest problem is just digital clutter overall.
I would agree with that with my business.
Yeah. Like, you have a lot of digital assets. Yes.
Yes, for sure. Well, and plus too, I don't think they make it necessarily easy because if I download something, it saves it to a download folder and then it gets lost in the download folder.
Duplicates of things. And like if you save it to Drive and then download it again, it duplicates itself. Or if you put it in a folder on your desktop and move it back out. Yeah. And that's why having a process for that, like I basically at the end of my day, anything that's on my desktop, I file it away into Google Drive and then I throw it in the trash and empty it. Like you just have to have a system in place to follow and then it's easier, but you do have to deal with like the backlog, right? So like you've got to get it up to speed and then start doing that. So it's overwhelming because there's digital clutter like crazy. It just never stops.
So is there anything else you wanted to talk about today or any tips or tricks you want to leave the listeners?
Yeah. No, I mean, I feel like we covered most of it. I think just give yourself grace because especially if this is not something that like you're just natural, it doesn't come natural to you. It's going to take practice. It's going to take time. It's going to take habit building. It's not something that happens overnight. So again, just start really, really small with something, go implement it, see if it works. And then we can kind of build from there. Because it's a skill that you've got to build. And just like if you wanted to go play the piano, you're not just going to learn that overnight. Right. So
can't be Beethoven in 24 hours.
Right. Yeah. So just give yourself grace and take it step by step and get more organized. What is the 1% rule? Like 1%, just 1% better. And then it compounds over time. So yep, that's it.
That's awesome. So how can people follow you and find you and hire you?
So our website is bcohq.co. I hang out on Instagram probably the most. It's brittanyandco.consulting, but website, you can pretty much find all the places we are. We have a free community as well. If anyone wants to come and hang out, we do like a happy hour and an office hours and a networking event. It's the productivitypodcommunity.co. So
awesome. And I'll put all of those links in the show notes so people can click and find you.
Awesome.
It was a pleasure having you today. You're welcome back anytime on our show. It was super fun. And now I'm going to start implementing some things. I'm probably going to start with the grocery
list.
Your
little Pinterest board thing, I never even thought of that. So that is genius. I like have a Google Drive folder for a lot of my screenshots. Pinterest board is way smarter.
Yeah, especially because you can share it with people too.
Yes.
So one of the things that I do when my clients book a shoot with me, I let them share a Pinterest board of ideas that they might have.
Yep.
And so that way they're not sending me 700 screenshots and messages and like, cause they'll email me and be like, I messaged you on Facebook and then I have to go to their message and then they'll text me and be like, did you get my email? And I'm like, whoa. So
that's
yeah,
like the metaverse of like communication. They're like, I sent you an email about my message, about my text.
Yes.
Like, what's happening?
So yeah, I have them send me like, they just create like an inspiration board. And then after their shoot, like most of the time I just keep them on there because there are lots of fun ideas, but like they can unshare it and stuff. But with the TikTok videos, it's the same thing. Like if you see a TikTok video, that's going to take away all your memory on your phone. So I just save it to different boards, especially if there's recipes or like crafts, or I watch a lot of cooking videos and stuff like that. Like, I'm like, I'm going to make those cookies or I'm going to make that dish or whatever. So it's easy to upload it. So I'm glad I could help you with that.
I love it. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me. This was great. And if anybody needs me, you know where to find me.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah.
Well, that's all we have for today's podcast. We thank you so much for joining, and I hope that you're having a fantastic day, and we will catch you next time with the Joss and Crowd podcast.